Let me start with an apology. All you young people out there, I am so sorry. I failed to prevent my generation from colonizing your land, your water, even your climate. My name is Bittu Sahgal and I'm 73 years old. For 50 years, my life's purpose has been to try and prevent my generation from colonizing yours. I started life out as a bucket salesman at the age of 17. I became an ad man at 21 in the early 1970s, and then frequent trips to the Ranthambore and the Kanha tiger reserves with my wife Madhu and our two darling daughters Miel and Tara saw me fall head over heels in love with India's wilds. My life found purpose as our family explored wilderness after Indian wilderness. For years, I never even noticed, however, that the vast wildernesses of the Indian subcontinent were vanishing. Chasing economic development, India's fabled coasts, forests, rivers, wetlands, grasslands, mountains, and even the remotest valleys were vanishing like ice cubes in boiling water. And it was sad because nature's timeless life support infrastructures were being replaced by ephemeral economic infrastructures, dams, mines, roads, urban sprawl, and as we came to know now, very, very toxic agriculture. But all was not lost. A quasi-pantheist, I knew that given half a chance, nature could fix itself. In 1981, I launched a magazine called Sanctuary Asia, dedicated to the proposition that the megafauna and the ecosystems of the Indian subcontinent just somehow had to be saved. In the mid-1980s, Sanctuary produced 30 documentaries showcasing the wildlife of India on Doordarshan, then India's only television channel. 30 million viewers saw the films, and we were given a chance to explain how and why saving India's wildernesses would actually deliver us real independence, real self-reliance. Using the tiger as a metaphor for all of nature in the 1970s, India's then Prime Minister, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, had set aside 9 vast and diverse tiger habitats that were protected from the plow and the axe. This gave wild species the fighting chance they needed. This was probably one of the world's first and absolutely one of the world's most successful rewilding initiatives. Nature-based solutions coupled with labor-intensive soil generation strategies magically repaired damaged ecosystems. Inside of a decade, dramatic results became visible. Grasses, bushes, trees, they sprang to life. With them came the butterflies which did all the magic, and dead and dying watercourses began to run pure. Project Tiger came to be known as one of the world's most successful conservation efforts. But India started out with an advantage most industrial nations still do not possess. We worship nature as religion, and traces of such veneration still exist. And that's why, in spite of being one of the most densely populated countries in the entire world, India remains our best hope for the survival of Panthera tigris and its wild ecosystems. One collateral benefit of this rewilding exercise was that the tiger's forests began to pump water into 600 Indian rivers. These rivers had nourished civilizations on the Indian subcontinent for a millennia. Our ancestors used to say, "Jangal nadi ki maa hai." The forest is the mother of our rivers. And Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, he desperately wanted such attitudes of nature reverence to be exported to the industrial world. He warned that India would need several planets to feed the insatiable appetites of millions if we began to emulate the consumption patterns of the colonizers. Tragically, Gandhiji was assassinated, and India chose to follow exactly the opposite path to the one he had advised. Post-independent India unleashed a war on wild nature that dwarfed the damage inflicted by the East India Company and the British. Rivers, corals, coasts, grasslands, forests and mountains, once treated as sources of life, became resources for trade. Today, the chickens have come home to roost in the shape and form of a climate crisis of unmanageable proportions. With all its handmaidens, its terrible handmaidens, floods, droughts, civil unrest, and tragically, the COVID-19 pandemic that has now triggered an internal migration in India of close to 40 million people who have moved from urban India back to their homes in rural India. COVID-19 happens to be just one of many zoonotic diseases that were caused by our war on nature. AIDS, SARS, MERS, Ebola, swine flu, bird flu, all these were warnings we did not heed. All involving viruses that spilled over from animals to humans. But these were just tiny, tiny messages from the biosphere underscoring the fact that we are less powerful than we imagine. But as I said earlier, and I will keep repeating this, all is not lost. The solutions to Homo sapiens' survival conundrums stare us in the face. In truth, instead of me addressing you here, I wish we could magically have spirited Charles Darwin back to life. In his path-breaking Origin of Species, Darwin pointed out that it was not the strongest, nor the most intelligent that would survive. It was the most adaptable. The most adaptable. If ever there was one single idea worth spreading today, Darwin nailed it. Adapt or die. Take the case of India. Apart from our dogged dependence on fossil fuels, we chose to build almost 5,000 large dams that collectively took a terrible toll of our people and our natural capital. And yet, planners today are hard put to point to even a dozen that fulfilled the promises that they made to justify the construction of those dams. The projected financial cost benefits turned out to be false. They were near fiction. Instead of preventing floods and droughts, all too often the dams caused both catastrophes. Why? Because the catchment forests of the dams were treated as wastelands. Deforestation, mines, dams, urbanization, all these caused the dam reservoirs to silt over much earlier than expected. And climate change has now added to such miseries. The water promised to millions of farmers to irrigate their crops now often doesn't reach them in time. This is one very tragic reason for the widespread farmer suicides we see today. Of course, the electricity that the dams promised industrialists is often missing in action as well. All these and other problems caused by faulty natural resource planning can be fixed. All we need to do is to use nature-based solutions, and India will be able to create between 25 and 50 million jobs and livelihoods in rural India to restore our sterile soils back to life. Our dam catchments, degraded forests, lakes, rivers, wetlands, coasts, farms, they desperately need manual labor to staunch the short, sharp Indian monsoon. With increased farm production, within a few short years, India's rural economy will see an uptick. GDP will bubble up instead of trickling down. By identifying the imperative of adapting to nature instead of forcing nature to adapt to us, Darwin gifted us with a master key to unlock the doorway to what Vance Martin and his team at the Wild Foundation christened the survival revolution. This involves leaving the task of planet management to the original gardeners of Eden. Bees, butterflies, soil microflora and fauna, and of course wind and water. The young can and they will achieve what world leaders failed to achieve at the countless global conferences and gatherings where promises seem to have been made just to be broken. But the young will have to understand and respect how to work with nature and how nature works. To them I say today, don't get angry, get involved. Your future depends on it. The dividends of a survival revolution would be blue skies, crystal waters, safe food, health, happy people. But we don't have a lot of time in hand. To avoid a tipping point and to restore half of planet Earth back to its natural state by 2030, we have to use your young energy and we have to use your young legitimacy to stop my generation.